Okay, so here are the later views on object relations or the attachment theories. So we have four proponents. Nandiyan si Margaret Mahler, Heinz Kohut, John Bowlby, and Mary Ainsworth. So let's hear from Margaret Mahler's view. So Margaret Schönberger Mahler was born in Sopron, Hungary and received a medical degree from the University of Vienna in 1923. In 1938, she moved to New York, where she was a consultant to the Children's Service of the New York State Psychiatric Institute. Kaya naman yung kanyang expertise ay sa mga bata. She later established her own observational studies at the Masters Children's Center in New York. And from 1955 to 1974, she was a clinical professor of psychiatry at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. And Mahler was primarily concerned with the psychological birth of the individual that takes place during the first 3 years of life, a time when a child gradually surrenders security for autonomy. So we have two types of birth, the physical and the psychological, according to Mahler, wherein when we say psychological birth, it pertains to the well-being, no? The psychological aspect, which is, yun nga, yung nagigain natin yung autonomy when we separate from the attachment to our mother or to our primary caregiver, no? And it happens during the first 3 years of life. So when we say psychological birth, Mahler meant that the child becomes an individual separate from his or her primary caregiver, an accomplishment that leads ultimately to a sense of identity. So to achieve psychological birth and individuation, a child proceeds through a series of three major developmental stages and four sub-stages. So, nandyan yung normal autism, normal symbiosis, separation-individuation. Okay, yun yung three major developmental stages. And sa separation-individuation, nandoon naman yung four sub-stages, which are differentiation, practicing, rapprochement, and libidinal object constancy. Okay? So, sa sinasabi niya ni Margaret Mahler na tayo daw, syempre nung baby pa tayo ay connected or attached, no, sa ating primary caregiver, which is usually the mother, no? And then we do not have this sense of identity at first dahil wala pa talaga tayong sense of self, and we do not identify, no, to our mother or to our father. Just like what happens during the psychosexual stages, di ba? Wherein the phallic, that is 3 to 6 years old, according to Freud, nag-identify si batang lalaki or si batang babae sa kanilang same-sex parent. So, in Margaret's view, wala naman siyang parang separation ng gender, no? It doesn't matter who is your primary caregiver. What matters most is that during these ages, yung first 3 years of life, we are gaining or we are starting to separate ourselves unti-unti, slowly, from our primary caregiver. And that leads to this sense of identity. Ayan. No, na nagkakaroon tayo ng individuation. Nagiging individual tayo. Pag sinabing individual, well, technically it means one. It means being alone. Alright? So when we were born, we are alone. And then we become attached or we become connected to this primary caregiver because we need help. Diba? We are vulnerable, we are helpless, and then we were taken care of by this primary caregiver, and then slowly, as we grow old, up to 3 years, unti-unti nagse-separate tayo as individual to gain autonomy, to gain independence, 'di ba? Literally, we stand on our 2 feet, 'di ba? On our feet, 'di ba? Kumbaga parang that's the start of being an individual, of being a separate entity apart from your primary caregiver. Okay? So let's proceed naman on talking about the developmental stages according to Margaret Mahler. Okay, so here we are. Number one stage is the normal autism. So from birth, this happens during from birth until about age 3 or 4 weeks. Di ba pag sinabi nating autism, parang may sarili silang mundo. Di ba? Yun yung isa sa mga characteristics ng mga bata or tao na merong autism. So, from birth until 3 or 4 weeks, no, na ipinanganak na tayo, of course, we have this normal autism characteristics, no? Para tayong may sariling mundo, na tayo lang nakakita, ngumingiti tayo, napapasmile tayo without any reasons, di ba? So, ganon. Mag-isa lang tayo dun sa mundo na yon. No? We are normally alone, kaya normal autism. And then neonates mean the newborns, have a sense of omnipotence because like unhatched birds, their needs are cared for automatically and without their having to expend any effort. So parang ang analogy nito is we are compared to an unhatched bird egg na parang doon sa loob ng shell, all our needs, um, our needs are taken care of, no? Binibigay. Yan, binibigay lang. Yun nga, as baby, di ba? Pinapadede tayo, kinakarga, hinahaplos, pinapalitan ng diaper and all. Yan. Kumbaga, wala, helpless ka eh. Hindi mo naman kayang gumalaw. Hindi mo kayang tumayo sa sarili mong paa. So, that's why we depend on the primary caregiver. Yan. And during this stage, we are objectless, according to Margaret Mahler. A time when an infant naturally searches for the mother's breast. And that's why wala, sinisearch pa, no? Hinahanap natin ang breast ng nanay kasi yun yung nagbibigay ng yun yung nagbibigay ng needs, no? Which is the primary needs during that time is food. Yan. Kaya sinesearch talaga siya, hinahanap. And when kapag wala, ayun. So hindi naman, kumbaga para kay Mahler, wala pa yung object na yun. So that's why hindi yun yung dahilan kung ba't tayo umiiyak, kundi dahil kailangan natin ng food, kaya natin sinesearch yun. Alright? So, hindi pa siya considered na object. Okay. In the next stage, normal symbiosis. Here, the infant begins to recognize the primary caregiver and to seek a symbiotic relationship with her. So, nagkakaroon na ng object. Okay? Na-recognize na yung primary caregiver, meron na siyang muka, meron na siyang identity, and syempre, hinahanap ng infant na yung binibigay ng infant ay matumbasan, no? Matumbasan ng care nung caregiver. Alright? So, parang kailangan merong give and take relationship, symbiotic. Yeah, so, this happens during 4th or 5th week of age, but reaches its zenith or yung peak during the 4th or 5th month. Okay, so parang sa analogy ba, again ng unhatched bird egg is the shell is now beginning to crack. Right? So nagkakaroon na ng parang nakakasilip na ng liwanag yung bird, yung egg. Okay? So parang sa baby, nagkaroon na siya ng, yun nga, na-recognize na niya na yung kanyang mother is an object, no, and usually, yun na nga yung mother din niya as a person. Yan. So, the symbiosis is characterized by a mutual cueing of infant and mother. Yan. So, para bang kapag si infant ay nag-cue na siya ay is going to cry, and then cries, and then the mother must respond to that cue na she must give the child breast milk or milk, 'di ba? Kasi nga umiyak na, nandun na yung cue eh, 'di ba? Nandun na yung ginib. So, kailangan meron na rin siyang i-take, parang ganyan, na care from the mother. So, ganon, symbiosis. Okay, then the infant sends cues to the mother of hunger, pain, pleasure, and so forth, and the mother responds with her own cues naman, such as feeding, holding, or smiling. Yun. So, kaya symbiotic. Alright? And then, the last stage is the separation-individuation. So, ito yung mahirap na stage, no, sa atin bilang tao. Kasi, syempre, nasanay ka na you are taken care of, no? Nasanay tayo na we are dependent on our primary caregiver, na all our needs are given without without exerting any effort from our part. And then during this stage at the separation or individuation, which usually happens during the 4th or 5th month of age until about the 30th to 36th month. So that is 12, 24, 3 years. Okay? So, children become psychologically separated, no? Hindi lang physically, syempre, but psychologically from their mothers and achieve a sense of individuation. Yan. Kaya kapag mga 2 years old, di ba, they assert themselves. The babies, the infants assert themselves. They now have the ability to say no. They now have the ability to react, to respond. No, they have their own likes, dislikes, ganyan. And yun, parang nandito na yung parang tinatawag din tong terrible twos, di ba? Kasi medyo matigas na yung ulo, no? Sinasabi niya na yung mga ayaw niya, yung mga gusto niya. Kasi nga, nagkakaroon na siya ng sense of individuation and begin to develop feelings of personal identity. So, they experience the external world as being more dangerous than it was during the first two stages. Yan, kasi nga, this is a world, the reality, no, na not all can be a caregiver, not all are good, may mga masasamang tao, masamang elemento, ganyan. So, hindi lahat na po-provide yung mga needs. So, yon. So, mas nagkakaroon tayo ng experience sa ating panlabas na kapaligiran. Any errors made during the first 3 years or the time of psychological birth may result in later regressions to a stage when a person had not yet achieved separation from the mother and thus a sense of personal identity. So, for example, magkakaroon ng trauma or makakaranas ng abuse, physical abuse or sexual abuse ang isang bata during the first 3 years. So, pwedeng hindi siya mag-grow psychologically. Pwedeng bumalik siya dun sa time na kung saan nakakonekta siya sa nanay niya. Na kung saan meron siyang kinakapitan na comfort. Na kung saan yun yung pinaka-safest zone or period in his life or in her life. Yan. Kasi nga, ay na-perceive niya na ang external world niya pala ay hindi mapagkakatiwalaan, na ang mundo ay malupit, na ang environment ay hindi okay na para ma-process yung kanyang individuation. Kaya babalik na lang siya doon sa time when she was comforted, the time when the safest, no, she feels the safest, which is yung nasa normal symbiosis or normal autism period, no, according to Margaret Mahler. Kaya lang, yun nga, hindi niya ma-achieve yung kanyang personal identity. And then, dito sa separation-individuation, we have 4 stages, di ba? Yung differentiation, syempre hindi agad-agad individuated ka na, di ba? So, magkakaroon muna ng differentiation. Let's see. Alright. Yan. Sa differentiation, 5th month until the 7th to 10th month of age, and is marked by a bodily breaking away from the mother-infant symbiotic orbit. So, ito yung months na kung saan parang humihiwalay ka technically or physically sa nanay mo. So, hindi ka na masyadong kinakarga, unti-unti naggagabay-gabay ka na, diba? Nakakatayo ka na unti-unti. Ayan. So, it was analogous to the hatching of an egg. Ayan. And then the infant smile in response to their own mother, indicating a bond with a specific other person. Okay, the first social response natin kasi is smiling. Kaya, once na, yun na, nagkakaroon na tayo ng differentiation stage dun sa separation-individuation period na kung saan ay we became aware or we become aware na we have a separate body that we can stand on our own. Okay. And then, practicing. Alright, so practicing, this is how infants physically begin to move away from their mothers by crawling and walking. So now, you are practicing, no? Kasi sa differentiation, you are aware na you are separate, no, from your mother. Your body are separate. And then, sa practicing, you can start, no? Crawling, gumagapang, and then starting to walk, or to stand up and to walk and to run. Yan. So, yan na yung pagpapatunay na parang you are an individual, a separate entity from your primary caregiver. Okay, so children easily distinguish their body from their mothers, establish a specific bond with their mother, and begin to develop an autonomous ego. Okay. And then, sa rapprochement, alright, so, and then libidinal object constancy. Ayan. Sa rapprochement, 16 to 25 months of age, they desire to bring their mother and themselves back together, both physically and psychologically. So, eto na. So, dito yung parang nagkakaroon ng confusion, no? Kasi parang gusto niyang humiwalay, gusto niya magkaroon ng autonomy. However, when you gain your autonomy, you are losing the connection. Diba? Parang somehow lumalayo ka sa nanay mo. So, parang dito, gusto mong malapit pa rin sa nanay mo, pero may sense of individuation. That's why whenever your mother is away, you cry, di ba? Mahabol ka, ganyan. It shows separation anxiety, di ba? And children of this age often fight dramatically with their mother, a condition called the rapprochement crisis. Yun nga, yung parang nilalayo mo yung sarili mo, pero at the same time, gusto mo na wag siyang mawala sa'yo. So, parang gano'n, no? May confusion on that part. Na you wanted to do things on your own, pero pag pinabayaan ka naman, pag iniwan ka, hanap-hanapin mo naman yung nanay mo. Na parang gusto mo may nagki-care sa'yo, gusto mo may nagsasabi sa'yo siguro or nagko-control sa'yo, but somehow you want to gain self-control in a way. So that is rapprochement crisis. Okay, separation anxiety. And then, the 3rd year of life, libidinal object constancy. Ito yung term na ginamit ni Margaret Mahler to define, no, what's happening here. Children must develop a constant inner representation of their mother so that they can tolerate being physically separate from her. So they must learn to function without their mother and to develop other object relationships. So like what Melanie Klein said, no, nagkakaroon tayo ng internal or ano to? we internalize the object, di ba? We have this mental representation of the object para siya ay maging constant. Kasi kailangan mo siyang ipasok sa iyong isip para siya ay maging constant, hindi mawala, para ma-tolerate mo, malagpasan mo, no, kumbaga makayanan mo, no, na pwede naman mag-exist internally sa isip mo, ang nanay mo, kahit na hindi mo siya kasama. Kumbaga, it doesn't matter if you cannot see your mother, as long as you know that your mother exists even when you don't see her. Okay? So, yun yung important doon. So, ayun. Kaya kahit wala yung nanay niya, dahil alam niya na nandyan ang nanay niya, kahit hindi niya to nakikita, kaya niyang mag-function. Kaya niyang mag-function normally and to grow normally and to develop other object relationships. Like what I've said before, object relations values very, very important, no? The mother-child relationship, because this is the foundation, the basis of developing future, later adult relationships. Alright, so next one is Heinz Kohut. Heinz Kohut was born in Vienna to educated and talented Jewish parents. He was a professional lecturer in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Chicago, a member of the faculty at the Chicago Institute for Psychoanalysis, and a visiting professor of psychoanalysis at the University of Cincinnati. A neurologist and a psychoanalyst, Kohut upset many psychoanalysts in 1971 with his publication of The Analysis of the Self, which replaced the ego with the concept of self. So yung ego kasi is different from the self according to Freud, no, and other theories, like the psychodynamic or the neo-Freudians. But for Kohut, he replaced the term or the ego with the concept of the self. In addition to this book, aspects of his self psychology are found in The Restoration of the Self in 1977 and the Kohut Seminars in 1987, edited by Miriam Elson and published after Kohut's death. Okay, so in Heinz Kohut's view, he emphasized the process by which the self evolves from a vague and undifferentiated image to a clear and precise sense of individual identity. So, from a malabo, di ba? Malabong image sa isang malinaw. Kumbaga, yung process, paano ba tayo nagkakaroon ng idea na we have this self, okay? Na hindi tayo kabilang sa self ng nanay natin, na tayo ay may sariling sarili. Di ba? Parang gano'n, meron tayong sariling self. Okay? Meron tayong identity. Ayan. He focused on the early mother-child relationship as the key to understanding later development. Ayan. Ito naman, pareho naman talaga. No, ito talaga yung parang foundation ng mga attachment theories, object relations, psychodynamic, yan, the early mother-child relationship. And he also emphasized that human relatedness, okay, yung pakikipagrelasyon, yung pakikipag-connecta, pakikipag-socialize sa ibang tao, hindi yung ating mga innate instinctual drives, tulad ng sinasabi ni Freud, yung mga sex, aggression, are at the core of human personality. So, wala daw kinalaman ng ating mga id at saka super ego, no, sa ating personality, kundi yung ating pakikipagrelasyon, no, yung ating relatedness to other human beings. Yan. Yan daw yung nasa core ng ating human personality. In caring for both physical and psychological needs, adults or self-objects treat infants as if they had a sense of self. Yan. So, sinasabi ni Kohut na yung trato daw natin, no, sa isang bata na lumalaki, dapat daw ay tinatrato natin sila na as if they had this sense of self. No, wag mo siyang i-treat na parang dependent sa'yo. Diba? I-treat mo siya na parang meron siyang sariling identity na. Kasi yun yung dadalhin nila. Okay? Yun yung madadala nila pag lumaki sila. Yan. So, kailangan yan physically and psychologically. Yan. Kaya okay na, halimbawa, kapag tatanungin mo siya, anong gusto niyang isuot, anong gusto niyang kainin, di ba? Ano yung, para doon, nabibuild up na yung kanyang sense of self. Okay? And then, through the process of empathic interaction, the infant takes in the self-object's responses. Yung self-objects is yung nag-aalaga, no? Yung caregiver, yun yung tawag niya doon. Self-objects. Kasi nga, tinitake natin, no, yung object na yun. But for Kohut, it's not object per se. It's self-object. Kasi nga, eventually, magiging part siya ng self natin. And eventually, we became an individual self because of internalizing that self-object that came from our primary caregiver. Okay? So, ano yung mga tinitake in natin dun sa mga responses ng self-object? Lahat, no? Pati pride, guilt, shame, envy, lahat ng attitude that eventually form the building blocks of the self. Kaya, be very cautious or conscious about your attitude, no? Kasi tinitake in din yun nung ating mga alaga, no? Yung ating children. Kohut defined the self as the center of the individual's psychological universe. Okay, so doon umiikot yung ating psychological makeup doon sa self na yun. Kohut believed that infants are naturally narcissistic. Okay? So, sabi niya yan, being narcissist is, it's not a disorder per se, but it's natural, it's normal to love yourself. Okay? It's more like, kasi parang, yung term kasi na narcissism is taken from, I don't know if that was from a Greek, tama ba? Si Narcissus, no? Too much love for himself. Nakita niya sa mirror, sa water yata yon, and then he became obsessed with himself. So, dun kinuha yon. And then, sa psychology, when we say narcissism or narcissistic attitude, meaning you become obsessed with yourself, you focus on yourself, or you always prioritize yourself, or you love yourself. Parang ganun. So, according to Kohut, we are naturally narcissistic. Talaga naman, self talaga ang inuuna natin. Now, we have these two basic narcissistic needs. The need to exhibit the grandiose self and the need to acquire an idealized image of one or both parents. Parang isa sa mga, or dalawa, no, sa ating mga narcissistic needs is yung maipakita natin yung self natin na maganda. Syempre, yung gusto natin ipakita sa mundo yung magandang part, 'di ba? Yung positive na part ng ating mga self, no? Which is yun nga, the grandiose self. And also, para i-acquire din yung ating iniidolong parent, gusto rin natin yun makuha, no? Doon sa ating parent, gusto nating mamana yung mga identity or yung mga characteristic ng parents natin na iniidolo natin or parehong parents. Yan. Pero yun nga, sa projection, introjection, kahit yung mga ayaw natin or yung mga hindi magandang attitude, beliefs ng parents natin, nakukuha rin natin, na-acquire din natin. Just because we have this idealized image of one or both parents. So, the healthy adult, sabi niya, continues to have positive attitudes towards self and continues to see good qualities in parents or parent substitutes. Okay, yung healthy adult. Yan. Although, it's normal to have a negative attitude, it's normal to see bad qualities, no? Kasi nga, we possess both good and bad qualities. Diba? And then, hindi lang naman, kasi kapag in-idolize mo isang tao, hindi lang naman yung good niya, pati yung bad, maano mo rin. Kumaga, makikita mo din, and yun, kaya lang, sabi ni Heinz, a healthy adult must have to see the goodness. Kahit na may nakita kang bad, you can still see the goodness and the positive qualities in your parents or towards yourself also. And kaya lang sometimes, hindi natin matanggap yung bad. So, when we see something bad towards ourselves, we are frustrated, we become disappointed, and then, ayun, suddenly, nagagalit tayo sa sarili natin, ba tayo ganun, ba't tayo ganito, yun, kaya nagkakaroon ng mga unhealthy coping mechanisms. However, a narcissistic adult does not transcend these infantile needs and continues to be self-centered and to see the rest of the world as an admiring audience. Ayan. So, ang negative side ng kapag sumobra na, no, yung narcissistic. Kasi okay lang naman, 'di ba, na makita mo yung goodness sa sarili mo. Okay lang na i-project mo yung goodness, positive vibes sa sarili mo. Okay lang na exhibit mo what is good upon yourself. However, when you become a narcissistic na, nagiging self-centered ka na at hindi mo na, kumbaga parang gusto mo, lagi kang unahin, lagi kang priority. Gusto mo, parang pakiramdam mo kasi lahat ng tao sa paligid mo ay audience mo na kailangan magandahan sila sa'yo. Pero hindi nga, you cannot please everybody. You cannot gain the attention of everybody. Just because you are good, just because you're beautiful, just because you're excellent. Yun. Kailangan ma-balance mo yan. Na you can care for yourself, you can love yourself, but at the same time, you cannot expect everybody to become attentive, to admire you, to prioritize you. Yan. Yun yung kay Heinz Kohut. And then, meron siyang dalawang term, no, sa kanyang narcissistic, the grandiose exhibitionistic self is established when the infant relates to a mirroring self-object who reflects approval of its behavior. The infant thus forms a rudimentary self-image from messages such as, if others see me as perfect, then I am perfect. Okay? So, parang ito, nakabase siya doon sa approval ng iba, doon sa feedback na nakukuha niya sa ibang tao. Okay? So, parang in-exhibit niya, kumbaga nagkakaroon siya ng exhibition ng kanyang sarili, pinapakita, no? Pag sinabi exhibitionistic, parang ito yung pinapakita mo sa ibang tao. Kung ano yung approve sa ibang tao, yun yung pinapakita mo. Ayan. Kaya kapag hindi approve, yun, you feel bad about yourself. Okay? Kasi nga, kung ano yung parang, if others see me as perfect, then I am perfect. So, what if others see you not perfect? Diba? Wala namang, there's no such thing as perfect. Diba? So, parang gano'n, no? And then, the idealized parent image is opposed to the grandiose self because it implies that someone else is perfect. Nevertheless, it too satisfies a narcissistic need because the infant adopts the attitude, you are perfect, but I am part of you. Okay? So, dito naman, meron kang pinanggagalingan naman, no? Parang, ano to, yung bang, let's say, hindi, kumbaga parang benefit of the doubt na, parent ko naman yun eh, 'di ba? At dahil ikaw ay okay, ikaw ay magaling, magaling na rin ako, 'di ba? Kahit na hindi ito approve ng iba, kahit hindi nakikita ng iba na magaling ako, pero ikaw, para sa akin ay magaling na. So, parang dahil ako ay part mo, no, hindi ako nag-individuated from you, nandun pa rin ako, dependent ako sa'yo, nakakonect pa rin ako sa'yo bilang aking primary caregiver, gano'n na rin ako, no, sa paningin ng iba. Parang I feel also excellent, I feel good also about myself because you are perfect. Okay? So, nasa-satisfy na rin yung narcissistic need doon. Okay, so that's it for the part 3 of our lecture sa object relations.